All right, welcome in everybody. UGA football live, all caps, on a Wednesday night coming at you at 7:30, roughly 4 Eastern. Already busy man coming from class. Former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch, man, he's a business guy. He's in school over there on the East Coast now, back on the actual best time zone. Artie, how are you doing, man?
Good. I know out of obviously our relationship has been developing over the years. I consider you a trusted friend and a partner in this, but I can assure everyone at home that no one is happier that I am on East Coast time zone than JC Shelton because he, yeah, let's just say he's not the most. He's not great with calendar invites in terms of days and times, and let's just say this, everyone. I love him, but the 1 hour time difference just truly broke his brain. So we're just going to leave it at that. Let's get back to the important work of talking dogs, and we'll go. We'll have ourselves a nice little session here.
Absolutely, and hopefully the Wi-Fi sticks true this time as well. That was like a rough live run last week,
That
first of the season, really, and it
fake
who knows?
news, fake news, fake news to everyone at home. It's not my Wi-Fi, but I digress.
Listen, we don't really know, but we'll impending investigation on that. Kind of like your brothers up north in the Michigan area.
Yeah, very good. Punishment's coming down to my boys.
Yeah.
Harp.
Thanks for everyone jumping on with us here. UGA Football Live on Twitter, Facebook. We're also at the Pole Sports Network on YouTube, wherever you prefer. We're here live, and we're going to be doing this twice a week during the season as well. So if you have any questions, please jump in the comments, throw them at us here. Got them pulled up. But Artie, I do want to open it up with one thing, and this is not on our notes, so we're just going. I just want to do it now because I think it'll be great to start out with. Actually, no, I'll take that back. I want other people to get in here first. I completely 180'd on you. My bad. What we'll do is we'll stick to regular scheduled programming. We'll go straight to the preseason coaches poll. We'll get some reactions out of us here. Okay. And Arthur, I want to go here first. All right. Obviously, George is at the top here. Okay. Big surprise, right? Heisman hopeful at quarterback, great offensive line, some weapons at receiver, as well as running back Trevor Etienne. Looked really good in the spring, and also a stable behind him as well. Defensively, you know what you're getting. Some questions in the secondary, but a lot of talent there, and obviously Malachi Stark's there, two-time All-American, right? Makes sense, okay? And Kirby Smart and a really good coaching staff. Makes sense, right? Number 2, Ohio State. Number 2, as far as votes go, with 2, oddly enough. And here's the thing, and it's not a big difference, I think, nationally. I mean, I think people, expected this, and it wasn't a surprise. Now, this is, I don't know about rankings for everyone else that's jumped in here with us on a Wednesday night, but you can leave the AP poll at home, because coaches poll, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear what these guys are ranking teams. But I think, really the thing that stands out to me when you're comparing, Georgia and Ohio State here, and Joel Klatt is really, like, I feel like the biggest name there who's keeping Ohio State at the top of at least his preseason rankings. And I'll preface this with rankings don't mean anything right now, really, but you got to rank them somewhere, right? So it's just interesting to me, so I'm going to share with you. Love the roster that Ohio State brings back, okay? Quinshon Judkins got him in the portal. He's a stud. Ibuka, stud. Caleb Downs, portal as well, joins 9 returning starters on what was really a really good defense last year. You can, you go ahead, Big Ten offensive talk, but still, Will Howard may be the answer, right? And quarterback, that's where they were lacking last year, and ended up biting him. It really did. It ended up biting him, right? He may be the answer. He won at Kansas State. He's been in college football for 15 years, okay? He's a dual threat guy as well. Who's to say that he can't step into that system and really transcend what they did last year, and get back to really putting up points on folks and against good defenses, right? But it's not proven in that offense with an entirely new team, new program, new teammates, right? Develop relationships, timing with receivers, all that stuff has to be considered. So that's why, and I've seen people make these points as well, or something like this, but it's like what you have returning for the Bulldogs at quarterback here with Carson Beck. I mean, that sets them apart, right? I mean, you have all that continuity that, is not there at Ohio State. And let's say even Oregon there with Dylan Gabriel. There's still some questions there. Everybody kind of looked over that almost after, hey, great portal get Oregon's going to, score 45 a game again like they did last season. It's not proven yet, right? So I think that's what Georgia has, and why you're seeing the coaches poll kind of react like this, as far as there wasn't a lot of, it wasn't a close between, Georgia and the Buckeyes here as far as the votes they got. And I think, and it's got to be, of course, in that continuity and a proven winner. Just one game by 3 points last year in the SEC championship, right? What do you think there, Artie? It's just my spill, and we'll start it out with a little JC rant, I guess.
No, I love your rants. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm of the belief I think Ohio State's going to be a very good football team. I think Ohio State will probably end up somewhere in the top 4 or 5 at the end of the season. And I think they have a legitimate shot to win the national championship. Why? Because they have no matter who is under center, they're going to maximize that person's skill set and maximize that person's production, right? I mean, the guy they had last year, and his name's slipping from me, I think he's at Syracuse now. Like, he had like 39 touchdowns or something. He had a ridiculous amount of touchdowns, like threw for like nearly 4,000 yards. But he didn't really have the get factor. Ryan Day is just kind of a quarterback guru, so he's going to get maximum production out of his quarterback.
And that was Kyle McCord.
Kyle McCord, yep, New Jersey guy. Kyle McCord. I think he's at Syracuse now. I could be mistaken. But I guess what I'm saying is this. Like, if Ohio State really does have a game changer under center, like, ranking is justified. It makes total sense, and they probably will be number 1 or 2 at the end of the year. But that's a massive if, right? Will they be good and competent at quarterback? Competent is basically their floor because of who Ryan Day is. Ryan Day is kind of like what Chip Kelly was when Chip was in his heyday at Oregon. Like, he's going to get maximum output out of his guys no matter who's under center. Now, like, if you take a step back and look at, like, preseason polls, which mean Jack, you know what, they don't mean anything right now, but it does give you a sense of like, hey, where is the nation kind of, and particularly the coaches, but also the press, seeing these schools before a snap of meaningful football has been played. And the reason why it is important is because the higher that you are ranked in the preseason, if you are able to maintain and float anywhere between that like 1 and 8 range, you are going to be able to have, let's say, more room for error, right? When you're talking about the top 12 teams, right? And obviously, as Georgia fans, that's not how we want to think. But, if you're an unranked team right now and you end up going 10-2 or 10-3, you might not make the top 12, right? But if you are a top 5 team now and you go top 10-3, you're probably going to make the top 12. And that's just the nature of college football, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think that's why preseason polls do matter. Now, Joel Klatt, like, smart guy. I think he's very good at what he does. But he's made his kind of shtick, him and Danny Kanell, is like, let's just hate on the SEC. Like, I think Joel Klatt is a little bit more thoughtful around it and smarter, and he's actually been pro-Georgia more than I'd say most SEC haters. But, I mean, it's hard for me to take those kind of comments seriously when, like, you're going to compare Georgia and Ohio State right now. Now, I do think Oregon's going to be very good. I think they have a ton of momentum. I think the hardest part that Oregon is going to have to deal with, similar to Washington and those other schools, is they're going to have to adapt to a very good Big Ten conference and what is now going to be a very gauntlet of a schedule. And that's kind of my biggest thing. I was having a conversation today with a former Georgia alum, Alex King. Shout out Alex King, Marine pilot, MBA, now works at Goldman Sachs. Kid's a stud. We were just kind of talking Georgia football. And, he was talking about how much he liked DeBoer just as a fan. And I love DeBoer as well. And I said, the one thing that worries me about DeBoer, not so much as like a threat to Georgia, but just like if I were an Alabama fan, is it is very different coaching in the SEC. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that like you can't have success, but if you're not able to transition from a big win or a devastating loss and get ready for the next week, because the next week might be a tougher opponent, right? Or it might be Mississippi State on the road, which is a super tough place to play. And so when I look at rankings and I just kind of see like, how things have shaken up, right, for teams that are ranked pretty high, right? The Oregons, the Texases, right? The, those guys are going to have to play an entirely different type of football because they've not been in their respective conferences that they're now in. That's kind of my
Absolutely.
2 cents on it.
I like it, man. And you're looking at the schedules here. Got to pull it up so we can talk. And shout out to Harry for pulling out Kyle McCord in the comments. Harry, good job. I mean, it really explains how forgettable McCord was. And shout out to him and as he pursues his next endeavors in Syracuse. But I hope he
See,
does.
I didn't think he was that bad, right? I just think that's
That's a hot take, Artie. That's a hot take, brother. That's absolutely a hot take.
I thought he was a good player. I think, but for the standards that they have set at that university for the quarterback position, it was not enough, right? And that's what I'm saying is if they think this kid's a game changer, then yeah, maybe Ohio State's going to win the whole thing. But
yeah, could be.
That's a big if. That's all I'm saying.
Very well could be. And the beautiful part of college football is we'll get to see this progress
all of
throughout a long, long season. Like, when is his moment going to be? If there is going to be a moment where, like, you know what? I can see this. I can see Ohio State beating a Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and Oregon if they get there as well in the late fourth quarter game with him at quarterback. Well, we'll see. But looking at the schedules here, we'll start with Oregon, and not as a gauntlet, I would put it. I mean, obviously, the biggest game for both of these schools that we're talking about is Ohio State, Oregon, October 12th in Eugene, which if you have a chance to go to that game, and it's being a Georgia podcast, I doubt that any listener will, but that would be awesome to be there for that. Heard it's a great place to see a game. I've never been, but that's obviously the creme de la creme matchup on that schedule for Oregon and Ohio State. But Oregon, too, I mean, they go at Michigan. I mean, you got Washington in the season, Wisconsin, Maryland, at UCLA, at Oregon State, week 3. I mean, I think they can do it but you did mention the challenge of playing that new conference. I think it really comes down to maybe the styles of football, right? Maybe up front for
100%.
all these teams joining the Big Ten is up front. You look at, you think up front talent as far as development and maybe beyond skills on the field on Saturday, development as well, talking about the NFL and its Big Ten SEC up front, right?
100%.
So I think that'll be a challenge. Now, Oregon, I think they do return a lot on the offensive line. They had one of the best in the country last season. Can they gel together and make a real difference there? And you got to keep Dylan Gabriel clean as he gets comfortable, right, from week to week. So I think that's a big.
But it's not a lack of talent. Like you're like, don't be confused with what I'm saying. Like it's just I think there is, and the SEC more so than the Big Ten. But you're exactly right when we're talking about the Big Ten. I mean, look when we're at when I was at Georgia, all of our bowl games, right? We played the Nebraskas of the world, the Michigan States of the world, right? And I just remember like in Texas A&M at the time was a Big 12 school, and it's like I remember just looking at Nebraska's offensive line, right, or Michigan State's like tight ends, linebackers, like I cannot highlight it enough how big these guys were, right? Like when I say corn-fed, dairy-fed, right? You know what I mean? Like the 6'8", 6'7", not fat, but weighing 330 pounds, tough, able to move people off the line of scrimmage. I'm not saying Oregon can't do that, but I'm just saying like, Michigan State offensive line, it's going to be a bunch of strong dudes. Are they going to be good at football? I don't know if Michigan State's going to be good, but they're going to punch you in the mouth at least for a couple quarters, and that stuff tallies up over the course of the season.
Yeah. And you look at Ohio State's schedule at Michigan State, week 3. Not week 3, week 4. You play Iowa at home this year. That's October 5th, right? One of the best defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like always the offense obviously questions there, but then you go from Iowa, and we talk about that. You're playing an Iowa team there with a good defense, and you go at Oregon the very next week, right? Then you get a bye week, Nebraska. What does Nebraska look like under Matt Rule this year with Raiola at quarterback, or Raiola? No, I always get messed up on that. At Penn State the next week, right? And then at Michigan at home to end the season. So I think that's definitely a bigger gauntlet than Oregon has. So we're going to learn a lot from that team, but not to focus on these two too much. I do want to get into the rest of the preseason coaches poll here live on UGA Football Live with Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end. Thanks for jumping on. Jump in the comments for us, guys. If you have anything you would like us to talk about, I'll throw it up on our screen. I want to ask you about Alabama here, and we'll focus on these quickly. Too high, too low, coming in at number 5 here in the coaches poll.
I'm a little bit bullish on Alabama because you and I have talked about this offline. We've talked about this on this podcast, right? If you have a difference maker at quarterback in college football, you have a chance. I don't care what your team is. I don't care what the makeup of the team is. Like if you got a guy under center who is a difference maker and he's a special player, I think Georgia's got one. I think Alabama's got one. I think Texas has got one, and I think Ole Miss might have one, right? And I just think it gives you a chance to win. Now, obviously, when you look at the whole team, right? Do I think Ole Miss is going to win a national championship? Probably not. Do I think Texas is going to win it? Maybe higher probability than Ole Miss, but I still think Georgia and Alabama are a tier above. And I know Alabama lost a lot in the transfer portal. It shook things up. DeBoer's a great coach, right? He is a great coach. He's succeeded everywhere he's gone. He's somewhat of a quarterback guru, right? Like he's been able to, I want to say guru, but he's an offensive-minded guy that knows how to like push the ball downfield. That's a lot different than what Nick Saban was, just in terms of an overall coaching philosophy. And at the end of the day, it's like there's still plenty of talent at Alabama, and what they lost in the transfer portal, they gained a lot of solid players, particularly dudes up front from Washington. So do I think that Alabama is going to go undefeated and win a championship? Probably highly unlikely. I don't think so. But I think them being ranked at 5 is appropriate because of how much talent is just there. The quarterback they have under center, and I don't think DeBoer is going to fail as a head coach at Alabama. I just don't. Is he going to win first year? Probably not. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about Alabama there. Welcome to the SEC moment versus Georgia in Tuscaloosa, September 28th. That's going to be a crazy game. But, I mean, you think about just the issues there with Alabama and really bringing in a whole new squad. I mean, there's a lot of pressure there, but I think, Nick Saban, and I don't know if you watch Hard Knocks, but I watched it last night, and he was on there talking to the Chicago Bears coach, Eberflus, about his approach when it comes to high profile guys and expectations and managing in those. And Kirby Smart talks about that all the time, right? And that's why he doesn't. And you'll notice, I think Glenn Schumann and Travaris Robertson spoke with the media this week, and I was reading through those quotes, and you notice that when they're asked about players, they never put expectations on them. They just say, "Hey, they're doing good. I would love to see him grow." That's kind of what they go with, right? They're throwing different questions, worded differently. Reporters trying to get, what expectations do you have of him? So we can write that and put that kind of by his name moving forward into the season. And they always stay away from that. So I think that's important for, if I'm an Alabama fan, if I'm Kalen DeBoer, is managing expectations for the team, right? And letting the fans kind of control that, but being like, let's manage our expectations there. And I think moving on to a little bit here with Texas as well. I mean, they just lost their starting running back today. He's going to be out for the season with a knee injury. So that's a little shakeup there. And similar to Notre Dame coming in here, where are they at? Come here. I got to use bigger fonts for my notes already. Number 7, coming in at number 7. They lost 2 of their starting tackles last year, both the NFL, really, really good players, one of them being Joe Alt. And really, so their second-year player, who was a top 10 recruit in the 23 class, he just got out for the season, right? He's going off-season surgery as well. So that's a big question for them. And they were already having battles at right tackle. So that's another top team that's kind of got a little shakeup here in fall camp already. But beyond that, I mean, I really don't have any issues with these. I just think the top of the rankings need to have some discussion. And to your point about the college football playoff, before we move on to some Georgia fall camp updates here, is I think it's more likely that we see a national champion have 2 losses rather than 0. this year.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Right. And I think you look at the top teams in the schedules they play, mainly being, let's focus SEC here. And you can even throw Oregon and Ohio State in there. We just talked about, obviously, playing each other. Is you think about who Ole Miss plays, who Georgia plays, Texas and Alabama plays. It's just, I think the national champion comes from that group, and that gauntlet. And then, again, you brought back, the preseason rankings, how they do matter a little bit with, the expectations had, the schedule there that's included into it. And Georgia can get in with 2 losses 100%, right?
So
Alabama, maybe. I don't
let,
It
let,
depends. Texas, I
let me
think.
expand. Let me expand on that, and I think that it's a really good, um, it's a really good point, and I think it's really important to kind of think about the changing landscape of college football and this new playoff system and how it's probably eventually going to go to 16 teams and so on and so forth. I think it might be already going to 16. I'm not really entirely sure, but Bill Belichick, love him, hate him, cheater, not cheater, goat, not goat, don't care. One of the greatest football coaches of all time. And if you kind of ever talk to guys that play for the Patriots, and they've all been on podcasts and talked about it, they would approach the month of September so differently because they had built up such a culture and a program in New England that they knew that they had room for error in the month of September. And then they would hit a groove come October. And then by November, they were humming. And by December, they were like, oh, these guys are peaking at the right time. And I think why I bring that up is the closer we get to the expanded playoffs, right now 12, is it's going to be more and more like kind of an NFL type season. Whereas I think coaches, as they get used to this and kind of see things and how they shake up, we're no longer going to live in a world where the expectation is to go 13-0 or 12-1 every year. And I think coaches are going to assess their team and their roster management and be like, okay, normally we would play this guy if he was a little banged up because we need to win this game. But I think you might see things, particularly earlier in the year, where it's like, all right, our Clydesdale running back is nursing an ankle. It's Alabama game. It's a huge game for us. But in reality, it's like we need to be playing in late December and January. Maybe we sit him to make sure he's right for October, November to get us there. So I do think as college football fans, we're going to have to readjust our brains a little bit to your point, because we're going to start seeing national champions with 3 losses, right? Maybe 4 losses at times. Who knows? But I do think that's something that fans need to get ready for, because I know I can already hear it now. It's like Georgia's got 2 losses, fire Kirby Smart, burn down Athens, start over, and then Kirby wins a national championship because, he might not win the SEC, but he's ranked 10th, right? And he's X seed in the playoffs. So I like thinking about it like that because I do think college football has changed so much, and with it, these expectations need to be adjusted.
Yeah. And there's nothing that wakes up a championship caliber team like a loss,
No doubt.
especially a later season loss. I mean, that just
100%.
really ignites some fire at any complacency, really, if it is a championship team we're talking about with good culture, good team culture. I think that just really happens a lot. Let's get into fall camp updates here, Artie. Focus on Georgia. This is a Georgia football podcast. Branson Robinson is cleared, slimmed down, right, at fall camp. Dude, I love his approach during the offseason. I think we might have mentioned this last week. Was just like, hell's coming with me when I come back. And that's a rephrase there. But that's basically what he's saying. And he was already feeling good in the spring. Now he's fully cleared. He adds to that group. Really excited to watch him here as he comes back from that knee injury. Other injuries to note here: Smael Mondon, foot; Tyron Ingram Dawkins, foot; Warren Brinson, Achilles, which already, I don't know. I think it's just the history of just horrendous Achilles injuries in all of sports. When I read that one, I heard it from Kirby Smart when he had this press conference. That one jarred me a little bit. Got to be very careful with that. He's a starter, right? He's got a lot of pressure on Warren right now. on that defensive line who really didn't perform up to Georgia's standard. Quotes around Georgia. That's something to note there, and their standard at the defensive front. So something to watch out for. They're going to hold him out, I assume, for a while, or really limit his availability to really heal that, because that's a horrendous injury if that were to tear, especially for a big man. Knock on wood, all the wood. Jordan Hall, stress fracture. He should be back, right? That's something that Ryan Puglisi, the quarterback signee, was dealing with in the spring. Missed a lot of time there in the spring game, but he's already back, so expect him to be back as well. And then Chris Peel, he has a foot as well, and he's been dealing with that for a long time. Now, Smile, read him practice report. He looked to be full go. So that's really good news. I think he is really overlooked because of the injuries he had last year, and then the really rise of C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson there and inside, and even Jalen Walker could be added into that, who we'll get to in a second. But he's going to be the top of draft boards. Let's say, barring any further injury, and he's able to come back. Leadership role though there. I mean, he probably knows the defense. Maybe among Dan Jackson, the best on that team. So really looking forward to watching him. I think he's going to have a really big season, and he's going to be that star really inside for Georgia. Now, when you talk about Jalen Walker and Michael Williams, they're cross-training an outside linebacker, something we've known it was coming. It's been talked about by the coaching staff for a while now, and even the players themselves. But that is the case right now in fall camp, right? Because basically, and it's what Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann were talking about over the offseason and head in at fall camp is like, these are game breakers in Michael Williams and Jalen Walker. Their athleticism, their football IQ, their ability and their motor. I mean, really to keep them on the field as much as possible, Artie, it makes sense to play them in as multiple positions as possible. And that's what Georgia does so well in defense. They play in multiple fits. It's almost, you look at, in NFL, we'll bring up another, kind of the Belichick tree, and Saban goes from that as well. But, Bill Belichick, the way he ran that Patriots defense for so long, they would come out with completely different looks on a game-to-game basis based on the opponent, which I think is obviously so very smart. But I think for Georgia to do that continuously is to have Jalen Walker and Michael cross-train. Go ahead.
And I think it's important, right? Great point. And I think it's important to kind of expand on that a little bit, particularly about our defense. I know a lot of people, you and I talked about it briefly offline and online last episode. Like, we're a little bit, fans are a little bit worried about the interior defensive line of Georgia. I'm of the belief that we have recruited enough studs there, and that Kirby Smart is probably letting a fire under these guys' asses and being like, hey, everyone thinks you guys stink, blah, blah, blah. Where's Jalen Carter? Where's XYZ of things to get these guys motivated. But that being said, when we're talking about Michael Williams and Jalen Walker cross-training outside linebacker, I can see that this defense, particularly with Schumann, a lot of veteran guys, tons of experience in the back end of this defense, meaning that they're going to probably play a lot of man because they can trust the guys and they have the talent back there in order to do so. So it's like, I think you're going to see a lot of mixed fronts, as you said, and you're disguised in different ways. You're going to have different types of bodies lined up all around the kind of what's called like line of scrimmage and that front 8, front 7. And they're just going to look to be wreaking havoc on opposing quarterbacks, right? How can we confuse opposing quarterbacks? How can we apply pressure to opposing quarterbacks, right? When we had the greatest defense of all time, if you will, like it was very easy just to line up and play because we were just superior pretty much across the board up front. I think we have tons of talent, but I think what's going to separate this year's defense is the football IQ on these guys because the guys at key positions have tons of experience. And I think we're going to be able to find different ways to attack offenses. When you play a team like Alabama with a dynamic quarterback or Texas with a great quarterback with a great pocket presence, you need to fluster these guys early. And I think Kirby does a great job, and he's an underrated kind of scheme guy, right? I think people are like, oh, he's got a ton of talent. Let's line him and play. Yeah, sure, they do sometimes. But I think that him and Schumann are going to get these guys in a position to attack offenses early and often. And I think when you see this point of like guys cross-training, you're able to do that when you have super athletic guys who are strong at the point of the attack, long, and have range. So I'm excited to see it because I think we're going to see a lot of exciting plays from the linebacker position for Georgia this year.
I do. Absolutely. That's my favorite position to watch on defense for sure. Um, Another note that kind of leads into my note there, Artie, you were talking about cross training is so Jared Wilson, the center,
Mm-hmm.
heard a lot of good things about him in the offseason from his teammates and his coaches, right? Replacing Cedric Van Pran. It's almost just because I've heard so much about him that I've kind of overlooked a little bit that void at center that Cedric left as really the anchor of that offensive line for 3 seasons. But I guess that's really wise because I've heard so much about Jared and expected him to take off there. But he was working to the side at one point this week, the undisclosed injury, I guess. I'm not sure what that was about. It wasn't reported. But Tate Ratledge, I thought that was interesting. He took his spot at center with the starting group. So it went left to right going Green, Fairchild, Ratledge, Micah Morris, Truss. So it's all it's interesting that they would rather, you know, obviously there's not an experienced option behind Jared Wilson because Jared has barely any experience in his own right. They would rather put Ratledge and slide him over, and that's another cross training thing. When you have a guy like Ratledge who's going to be one of the top offensive guards taken in the spring, when you have a guy like that, you'd rather move him over and keep him in the lineup, right, than have somebody else coming in for him. So that was just an interesting note. We don't have to expand on it, but something to look out for in case something does happen. And those do happen during the season. Unfortunately, even we knock on wood all we want. And I want to share a note here that I heard from Cole Kublik, ESPN analyst, former football player himself. He had this interesting take on Carson Beck when he was discussing, the coaches poll on his podcast. I think it was with Greg McElroy. So I'll just read it here. But still, I'll take Carson Beck, who I've been told has had an amazing offseason. Beck is going to do these things. Beck is doing these things this offseason that he was not doing a year ago. He's seeing a lot of things that he wasn't seeing a year ago. So obviously he's being told some stuff about Carson there, and it's a good sign. We kind of expected at this point, but it's good that he hasn't gone complacent. And I don't think Georgia and Mike Bobo, and him, would not let him get that way anyway.
No, well, look. Let's take a step back too. Remember, in the first couple of weeks of last year, we knew that this guy was uberly talented. There was a lot of outside noise being like, does he have the X factor? Is he going to be able to take the next step? And obviously he did. But we talked about, you and I, we talked about a theme, right? Building confidence in anything that you do in life. Business, if you're a teacher and it's your first time entering a classroom with 30 kids, whether it's first grade or you're a college professor, if you're a doctor, it's your first time. So like the first time you do anything, or at least you're just going to be nervous. And it was the first time for him to be the starting quarterback at University of Georgia. He's a redshirt junior. He hadn't been the guy in any sort of football setting since high school, which was 4 years prior. And then what do we see each week? Each week he got a little bit better. And then those little steps became giant steps. And then by the end of the year, we're like, is he going to go or is he going to stay? Right. And I think now that he's built that confidence, the coaches see that he has rightfully earned that confidence, developed that confidence. They're like, oh, let's unleash this guy a little bit. Let's give him more responsibility. Let's give him the opportunity to make plays or make adjustments to the line of scrimmage, call audibles, like get us in and out of certain plays that we want to run. And I remember, I lived with Aaron Murray while we were at UGA, and I got to see him every year progress. And I remember him going from like his redshirt freshman year to his redshirt sophomore year and then junior year. And he was just like, we would have conversations. I was like, what's different this year? It's like, A, things are slowing down for me. And B, with each passing day, I'm gaining the trust of Mike Bobo to allow me to kind of dictate where this offense goes. So my thought is, I haven't talked to Mike Bobo. Obviously, I haven't spoken to Carson Beck. I don't know him, but that would be my hunch is he's doing things this offseason that he has not done before because, and to be quite frank, that a UGA quarterback probably hasn't done in quite a few years because I love Stetson Bennett. Like he will go down as a Georgia folklore hero, but like he was limited talent. Like, he was just limited. Right? Like Carson Beck is going to be a top 5 pick for a reason. And my guess is that the Georgia offensive staff is like, let's let this guy cook a little bit. right?
Mm-hmm.
He's got his mojo back. He knows he's the guy. He's approaching this humbly, right? He's not being arrogant about it. But when he goes on the field, I imagine he goes on with a certain type of swagger, and that swagger is an infectious feeling by those guys around him. That offensive line gets that swagger. Those running backs, those tight ends, those receivers, it's a real thing. It's just like when he exudes confidence and he gains control and he's the general out there, other guys will follow and their level of play will rise with Carson Beck. So that's what I think. When I see that quote, that's how I read it. Now, could be smoke and mirrors because he is an Auburn guy, so he could just be saying that to how I feel about Auburn. But that's kind of how I feel about Carson, and I'm happy to hear those quotes because I think he's going to have a big year.
Absolutely, man. If I'm a Georgia fan, I'm not worried about it. I mean, I think just what he showed in the road games last year and the comebacks, and even in the postseason. You can talk about the Alabama game all you want, but I just think and how important rather is that confidence on the road in the SEC or in the postseason, right?
It's huge. It's everything.
You can't measure it.
No, you can't. You
right.
cannot. But you also it's not a talent. It's like it's a learned, developed skill. Talent is throwing, a 25-yard out route, right, on a dime. But like a developed skill set is that confidence, that ability to go into Knoxville, right, go into Austin, go to Tuscaloosa, and you're like this, and your teammates are looking you in the eyes, and all they see is that killer instinct. Like, I'm not rattled, right? We're going down, we're scoring, we're backs against the wall, good. This is how I like it. I just think, we have a chance to have a great season because we got a dude under center. Unfortunately, there are also some other dudes under centers elsewhere. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, man, and I think you agree with me, when you got a dude under center, it's like it changes the whole persona of your football team. It just does.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. And with that, Artie, everybody listening, watching, I have a treat for you. So I got Kirby Smart on the phone this week. And I really wanted to ask him. I was like, Kirby, the SEC is projected to institute mandatory injury reports every week, and we know how he feels about said injury reports. Okay,
I love it.
We already know that. So I capital J journalism,
big J guy.
Hey, that's me, JC, capital J. And I got a little something from Kirby, and he just gave us. I was like, tell Georgia fans, what do you think of these things? If you were to ask if this player is going to be out, and you have to write this down, what would you write in that slot? Maybe doubtful times 85, however many players they're allowed. Let me pull this up for you guys. I think you really enjoy it. I just got to find it here. Here it is. And we'll just listen to Kirby here talk about injury and then maybe the mandatory injury report that might be instituted here.
Hopefully I don't know how long it's going to be. He's got a dinged up injury that hopefully we're able to get him back from, but don't know how long it's going to be. I mean, there's a chance, you never know, but he's dinged up. So I'm hoping we can get him back as soon as possible.
That was his answer. So just hopefully we get him back as soon as possible. And I think you can go ahead and write that in, pencil that in for these mandatory injury reports from Kirby Smart, the Georgia head coach, headed into
the whole team's gonna be doubtful every week.
Absolutely, baby. That's all I was thinking about when I read that. I was like, well, that's not. I mean, and also, you think let's say you're a college football veteran, and you're like, okay, I got Georgia, Clemson this week. Who's out? Who's nursing something? Is Carson Beck got an elbow? You're not going to learn anything. You're going to find out when everybody else do, and that is on Saturday about 2 minutes into game time, not even before.
No.
All right.
100%. Oh, running back's doubtful. He just took it for 80.
Absolutely. Okay. It's been a great show already. I think we do need to end it with one little thing, just to bring up some, it was a point of contention for us guys. And if you didn't follow us along with us last year, we first off appreciate you for jumping on and give us a chance here to talk a little Georgia football. But, a big point of contention for us nationally. See, me and Artie, we would do reactions to the CFP projections and rankings each week, ultimately rankings. And, you know, Michigan in October had a situation, okay? His name was Connor Stallions and Jim Harbaugh. Now, and others that were not there as well. And a recent development in this whole situation for the national champions, undefeated, of last year, Harbaugh was not only suspended for 6 games last year, he was also just handed level 1 violations by the NCAA, which are the worst that they can hand out. And it was basically and to really sum it all up, is for not cooperating in the investigation of his recruiting violations over the COVID mandatory break, or dead period, I should say, in 2021. And that's not even regarding the Stallion situation, right?
That's why he got the penalty. Oh dear, what are we even talking about?
Yeah. So just imagine.
Who cares?
Imagine,
dude. He's in LA. What are we talking about? Hold
on, Artie. Let me get here. Okay, let me get here.
Did Harbaugh like slap your mother at some point?
No, I just thought we all were like, okay, listen, Mickey Mouse championship. Okay.
Oh my God.
Because a little bit, it has to have an asterisk on it. It has to, because you think it didn't, because he was like 40-3 after Connor Stallions, right? Joined. But before that, I can't pull the number off the top of my head right now, but it wasn't like that. I'll tell you, it was like 30 and almost 20 and something like that.
Dude, right? Harbaugh is sitting in Manhattan Beach right now. Rich. That doesn't care. What are we talking about?
What I'm saying is, asterisk. God, it has to have an asterisk on it. I think because, and then we haven't even seen the Connor Stallions documentary that's about to come out, and you think it has to be why the NCAA kind of leaked some things about it, right? The information that wasn't previously known, because the documentary is about to come out on it on Netflix. Be front and center. But you were kind of being like, no, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's still championships. Dude,
they beat Alabama, and then they beat Washington.
They're talking about a postseason ban for the Stallion stuff, possibly. I mean, you're going to ban them for the postseason, but you're going to count, right, the games that were won to get to that national championship in 2023.
They won. It's over.
It is over. It is over, but the investigation is not over. All right.
I don't care if they strip him of it. They stripped Reggie Bush of a Heisman for no apparent reason, and then they give it back to him.
Wait, I don't agree with the Heisman at all. Okay,
I know,
I'm just saying I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it if NCAA, who I don't even like anyway, really put the hammer down.
As your friend, I want you to move on. This is getting out of control.
Oh, I'll consider it, Artie.
All right.
I'll say some prayers later and ask God if He wants me to move on to it, and then it's ultimately up to Him.
Right.
Yeah, praise Jesus. All right, guys, it's been great. Thanks so much for joining us on August 7th on a Wednesday night. I really appreciate it, and you can follow us along with us on these live shows on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. But also, go back on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube if you miss it. So don't worry about it. It'll replay. We're going to be doing these throughout the season, twice a week. We're still working on the dates and what will be best for myself and Artie as he gets into his new life situation, really, at business school, man.
Yes, sir.
Rocket ship's taking off. I love it. Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining with us, and we'll be back next week. Been great, Artie. Thanks for taking the time.
Go blue. Go blue.
Oh, don't say that on that. Don't say that.
Free Harbaugh.
Oh my gosh, you better end that with a go Dogs, man, because I think we're gonna have some hate mail. There we go.
I just love firing you up, dude. Love firing you up.
All right, okay. All right.
Till next week.
Till next week. Go Dogs.